All right. It looks like we are live. Let me just make sure things are looking okay. Looks like the stream quality is all right. Cool. Let me see if the comment highlighting works. Looks like it should be working okay. Hey, it looks like a few people just joined. So welcome, Sid here. Just wanted to create a little live stream to celebrate hitting 10,000 subscribers on this channel and do an Ask Me Anything where people can type questions into the chat and I will answer them. And I'll throw them up on the screen like this. So until there's any questions, I will probably... Hey, Martin, welcome. Peace sign emoji. Thanks for stopping by. I'm trying to see why I'm not getting, so I'm trying to, oh, there's the comment. Nice. There's quite a bit of delay between the stream and the live chat. So let me see if I can reduce that. How are you today, Martin? All right. Yeah, so in the meantime, while I'm waiting for people to join and ask questions, I was just planning to pull up some notes or start taking some notes sort of around future content that I'm thinking of for the channel, what direction I want to go in, and that sort of thing. And so I will pull up a notes document that I had to start to do that. And in the meantime, feel free to drop any questions or comments that you have into the chat there. Let's see, turn that on, change my camera a little bit. And so I use this program called Joplin. It's an open source tool that you store all your notes just in normal text files. And then you can have this cross-platform client between your computer, your phone, etc. It's all open source and you own the data. And so that is what I use for note-taking. I haven't really found a good note-taking system that I like. And so I kind of jump from one thing to the next. I have this, I have Trello boards. I've heard good things about Obsidian. So maybe I'll dive into that. And there's some really cool sort of two-way linking structures that you can put together in Obsidian that make note-taking pretty cool. But yeah, so on the channel, historically, I've done a lot of stuff with Docker. I have done a little bit of stuff with Kubernetes, some interview type content. And these are all just markdown files, which is nice. one thing that I'd really like to do is to add some interviews with startup CTO slash DevOps leaders. Evan Dewey, look at that. We got a celebrity in the chat, folks. So Evan is a friend of mine who has been a longtime supporter of the channel, even though he is not in the DevOps space. So glad to see him here. Make sure to smash that like button, Evan. But yeah, I want to add sort of a series of interviews with technology leaders at startups talking about how they approach DevOps within their companies, what their initial sort of MVP infrastructure looked like for their platforms. Oh, why is that? Oh, I have my Joplin over top of my. You can tell I'm very experienced here as a streamer. Let me move that so that pops in front. Also want to talk with them about sort of issues that they ran into while scaling. And so I know a number of people who have started companies, and I've worked with a number of startups. And so I would want to reach out through that network to source these people. And I think that could be a pretty interesting series. I also want to figure out how to do like a distributed open source, almost like a conference. So where other people could put together conference talks in the form of a recorded video, and then we could play that on the DevOps Directive channel, and then have like a live stream question and answer session afterwards. I think could be a pretty interesting format, especially because conferences these days are pretty much fully remote anyways. And so there wouldn't be too much difference between a platform like a YouTube channel, such as DevOps Directive, and a conference that you might have in the past attended in person, but in this case, you would just be presenting to the audience of the channel. So I think that could be cool. If people are into that concept, I might put together a sort of a call for proposals or presentations that I could put out there, and anyone could contribute. So I think that could be kind of interesting. And those could be either lightning talks or full sort of conference talks type things. I also have some content about Terraform in the works. Terraform is an infrastructure as code tool that you can use to provision infrastructure. And I see a comment here from Manas. Please make a video on Keycloak with Kubernetes web authentication. I'm not familiar with Keycloak. Let me look up what Keycloak is. Open source identity and access management solution. So is Keycloak like a competitor to Auth0 or something similar? I'm guessing. And I'll actually put my browser. Let's see. Let me add a new source. I'm not very good at OBS, so I don't have a bunch of presets, and instead I'm doing it all on the fly. So this will be just browser. Keycloak. Whoa, way too big. I also should get a stream deck or something so that I can more effectively switch between all these things. Sorry for the technical difficulties here. Zoom in a little bit. Turn off Joplin. Move that down. Okay, awesome. At least now we are set up for future searching. So yeah, Keycloak, open source identity and access management from Red Hat. Add authentication to applications and secure services with minimum fuss. Yeah, so it looks like a competitor to like an Auth0 or an Okta, but is open source. So that is very cool. And I should add that to the backlog. Specifically, you were asking about in the context of Kubernetes. Yeah, I think that could be cool. So pre-recorded, back to the conference talks idea. Basically pre-recorded talks focused on DevOps and cloud infrastructure. Let me turn that off, turn that back on. Sure, I'm just glad to have some people here to chat and ask questions. So feel free to keep them coming. Thanks for the suggestion, Manas. Yeah, so pre-recorded talks focus on DevOps cloud infrastructure, with the idea being that we would play them on the channel in the form of a live stream. So it would be pre-recorded, but the talk itself would be live streamed, and then I would have the speaker on for an actual live session at the end where we could take any questions. Lightning. Take any questions that the audience might have from the talk and answer them in real time. So I think that could be a pretty cool format. But in terms of Terraform, I think what I want to do there is put together a full end-to-end course. I haven't decided if it should be like massive crash course, multi-hour, or a multi-part series. So sort of having one section on the basics, one section on all the different syntax and methods to use within Terraform, and then more portions on advanced, intermediate, and advanced concepts. I've already started working on this, but I haven't recorded any of it yet. So hopefully I can find some time in the coming weeks and months. I do think more Terraform or more Kubernetes content would be super fun and exciting. I love building stuff with Kubernetes. I think it's a pretty amazing platform. We'll always be doing more Docker content. Actually, my video yesterday about building the smallest possible Docker container is doing pretty well. So that was exciting to see. And I was able to build a Docker container that was less than 7 kilobytes, and it was still a functioning web server. So that was kind of cool. Another thing that I think could be interesting is that using a lot of these DevOps and cloud infrastructure tools within a vacuum is not all that useful. They kind of need an application to provide the necessary context to hit lots of the nuances and the potential roadblocks that you might face. And so what I've thought about doing is sort of building out a reference architecture, I guess I would call it. Let's see, header 2. I see the null channel here in the chat. Merrick, thanks for the support. Yeah, I think a multi-part series would definitely be easier to watch. And there's also nothing preventing you after releasing a multi-part series from combining it into one massive crash course type thing. So yeah, I think it could go either way. I think I've seen YouTube sometimes really likes or seems to push the large, long format crash courses as sort of a complete resource that an individual might bookmark and come back to over and over. But yeah, I think it could go either way. And I think there's probably more community engagement in a multi-part series in that format. The null channel, Merrick actually decided to take on my tiny Docker container challenge and stretching the rules a bit, but he was able to produce a size 0 container image by mounting in his executable. So it wasn't actually built into the image. So I think that was kind of a funny approach on my challenge from yesterday's video. Astrid, congrats on hitting 10K. Great job. Keep up the good content. Thanks, Astrid. I know Astrid is the creator of, I think it's css.gg, maybe? Yeah, css.gg. I'll post a link in the chat. But it's an icon set that is super cool. So everyone should check it out and check out his YouTube channel. Same thing for the null channel. He has a YouTube channel that goes really deep into a lot of topics that I think the audience of DevOps Directive would also find interesting. He dives into Kubernetes. He's done some stuff on Kubeflow, Linux networking, all kinds of good stuff. And then Astrid is even newer on YouTube. Let me find their channels and give some links. Or you can just click their profile, I suppose. But yeah, he focuses on design and front end stuff. Some really cool stuff going on there. The null channel cheated, indeed, but in the best possible way. Thanks. No problem, Astrid. Glad to see you here. I think we initially connected via Twitter Spaces, so that's been fun to sort of jump in with a bunch of tech Twitter and hop on live audio calls. I've actually considered using Twitter Spaces as a mechanism to let people dial in, kind of like a radio talk show. I got it hooked up where I could take my phone input. Let me do this real quick. I could take my phone input and using a program called Screen Copy. So let me get this going. I can actually take my phone screen and have it pop up here. So I was thinking that I might, let me make sure I'm on Do Not Disturb. Cool. Yeah, so I was thinking I might try to do something where I have a Twitter Spaces live and then people can come on and ask a question and that audio would be streamed into the stream, and it could be a way to ask questions, not just via text, but also via voice. So I thought that could be kind of interesting. But for this first stream, it seemed like a little bit too complex to get working properly. Cool. Mana says, I'm very interested in Kubernetes. I just want to know about webhooks in Kubernetes. So webhooks in Kubernetes should work like webhooks anywhere else. You need to have an endpoint that is listening for the request that would signify that webhook. And so you need to make sure to set up the networking properly such that you can receive that webhook event. Yeah, so I don't think there's anything in particular that would make Kubernetes that different from other situations where you're using webhooks, except that you need to set up the networking and the ingress such that you can catch those inbound requests. Tech Rally in the audience. What's going on, Alex? How are you? Good to see people here. Also, it's funny having to map between people's channel names and their human names. Hopefully, I'm not going to make any mistakes when people have channel names that don't quite match. But yeah, just to reset what I was doing, basically just wanted to hop on here. Thanks everyone for coming. I'll be on here for a bit longer, but in case people have just joined, just ask any questions you want in the chat and I'll try to answer them. And when there's no questions or a lull, I'm just sort of typing out thoughts on the potential ideas for future content. So feel free to suggest future content ideas as well. This was a suggestion from the audience from Manas, using something like Keycloak to do authentication within Kubernetes. Happy to add community ideas to the backlog. And a couple of things that I had gone over so far, like putting together a series of interviews with DevOps leaders at startups and companies and trying to understand where they use DevOps, how they use DevOps, and what that means for their companies. So I think that could be interesting, as well as opening up the platform for potential audience members who want an opportunity to almost do like a conference talk. The notebook app, this is called Joplin. It is open source. Joplin. I'll put a link to it. Yeah, just joplinapp.org. It's pretty interesting. It just uses markdown files behind the scenes. You store those markdown files wherever you want. So in this case, I have them automatically synced to my Dropbox, and that way I can connect to it from mobile or desktop, and it automatically syncs across all my platforms. So it's kind of like a Notion or some other note-taking platform, except that I'm in control of the data versus it being in this third-party system. But it's pretty good. I don't have as good of a system as I would like, but it does the job. Hello, Eugene. Welcome. Thanks for stopping by. And if you haven't already, make sure to give a thumbs up to the video, just so that YouTube will push it out to more people and we can get a little crowd in here. I should also try to, I wonder if I can get some Stream Beats audio going. That would be interesting. I have no idea how to do it, but I could probably figure it out. Cool. So I'm just gonna go. Yeah. So. Yeah, I think I'll try to get some Stream Beats audio playing in the background as a fun task to try to do live, while other people are coming in and commenting and asking questions. And you are welcome, Matty. Matty, is that pronounced correctly? Hopefully I'm not butchering it. Cool. So I'm gonna try to grab Chrome. Hopefully that's not too loud. Let me know if it is too loud or too quiet. Let me see. Can someone give a thumbs up if they can hear music playing? in the stream. No idea if that worked. I'm trying to use my there's a mixer app that comes with this microphone from Elgato that I'm trying to use, but I don't know if it's actually working. Let's see. Move input. Nope, not now. Okay, good to know. Oh, it did a second ago. Okay. Hopefully. Okay, it looks like it's playing. Let me just turn it down. There we go. Oh, okay. I'm having trouble figuring out how to monitor the levels. Oh, there we go. Cool. So yeah, we got some copyright-free stream beats going in the background. A bit lower. Okay. I like that the dab emoji is turned into elbow cough by StreamYard. That's pretty funny. Cool, cool. Here's what you need to do. Run the Elgato software in a container inside a Kubernetes cluster on DigitalOcean, deployed by Flux. That would certainly add some complexity. Yeah, I'm not sure why it keeps disappearing like that. Let me see. Okay, now I'm playing it through Spotify. Maybe that'll stick. Okay. So now we can jump back to what we were doing before. Also, continue to ask any questions you want in the chat, and I'll be happy to address them. Hey, thanks, Merrick. Glad to see you stop by. We'll try to continue making better and better content. I think with each video, I learn something new, and hopefully that shows in the content. Yeah, I'll have to come up with a challenge and set the rules a little more strictly. Uh-oh, we got D Thompson in the chat. Danny's coming through. There's a delay though before I can put it up from StreamYard, but I'll get his comment up here in a second. How you doing, Danny? Danny coming in with the hard-hitting questions here. How do you keep your beard so glorious? The beard is a labor of love, you know. I don't really do too much for it. I put some beard oil in it occasionally. I did have a challenge with myself where I said I wasn't going to shave my beard between 100 subscribers and 1,000 subscribers, and that took many months. So if we look here at my studio, let me pull up. Let's see. Turn Chrome back on. So if I go in here, oh, there's my own video. It wants me to watch it. I go to channel analytics, subscribers, all time. So yeah, there was a long period here through most of 2020 where I was getting just 1 to 10 subscribers a day, I would say. And so I think I hit 100 maybe somewhere in here over the summer, and then I didn't hit 1,000 until this day. And that was November 4th or 5th. And that is when I had my guest post on Traversy Media. And that one video, I think, tripled my channel within like 2 weeks. So I went from about 800 subscribers to nearly over 2,000 in just about a week. So that was kind of a crazy growth period for the channel, which was very exciting. And then the second peak here is my Apple M1 video that absolutely took off and went kind of crazy. D Thompson says, can't complain, last few days before the new job. Yeah, that's super exciting. I'm so happy that you got that new role. It sounds like a perfect fit for you, and we'll be excited to see what you do in that new role. We'll be following along, certainly. Danny comes, be prepared to listen. Yeah, luckily it's text only, so he can spam the chat as much as he wants, but we can always put him in timeout mode and silence him if we have to. Happy to have everyone here at the stream, you know. Fire, fire, fire. Certainly. Are the music levels okay? Earlier they were too loud, then they were too quiet. Just got the default Stream Beats house blend going. Thanks, Danny. Really appreciate the support. Yeah, when I started this channel a year ago, a little over a year ago, I certainly didn't think I would reach 10K in about a year. Oh, that's funny. Because I have the the hack that I'm using to get these comments in is I have it running in StreamYard, and then I have a chroma color on their default background color. And so it just happens to exactly match Danny's beard color. So that's why we have this funny, partially transparent Danny in the comment. Thanks, man. I appreciate the kind words. Just trying to help people level up their DevOps and cloud infrastructure skills. So glad that people are finding it useful and tuning in for this content. Yeah, I've also been doing some developer advocacy work part-time for various cloud providers. So I have a couple of videos that will actually be going out on the Linode YouTube channel in the next coming weeks about Terraform. So that's kind of a fun way to branch out and not just put out content on my channel, but also partner with these cloud providers to put out content through some of their avenues. Joran J says hi. Hello. Thanks for stopping by. Glad to have you here. Yeah, earlier I mentioned this reference application architecture, and what I was thinking there is to have essentially a relatively simple SaaS application, maybe with a Stripe integration, an actual database, maybe something like Postgres. Probably would do Node.js for the API, so it'd probably be something like React on the front end, Express Node.js API, Postgres DB for the database, Stripe integration, Auth0, and then, so that would sort of provide this framework, and then I could walk through how you would go about deploying this in a number of different ways. So you could have one version that would be serverless, either using Lambda or Cloud Functions or otherwise. You could have one version in a platform as a service, so something like Heroku, and then you could have another version that would be custom, or like if you really wanted to scale, you could have one version in Kubernetes. And so I was thinking I would have this sample application and then use that as the framework to build out all of the DevOps tooling around it for any of these different situations. So that could be something that comes down the pipeline in the future. Lana says, oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you, congratulations. It is party time. Yeah, I should turn up the music, huh? I should crank up the volume. Do you think being a tech YouTuber gives you extra job opportunities? I have gotten some job opportunities through my content creation. So I have had consulting work that comes through written articles. So when I first started DevOps Directive, I wrote this article. Let me pull it up here. Turn off Joplin, turn on Chrome. Articles, Kubernetes. Yeah, so I wrote this article. This was one of the first articles that I wrote on the website, and it is essentially looking at the different managed Kubernetes offerings. So Google Kubernetes Engine, Elastic Kubernetes Service, Azure Kubernetes Service, and DigitalOcean's Kubernetes. and looking at how their pricing compares for different architectures in terms of number of clusters and number of nodes within those clusters. And this article got picked up on Hacker News and brought, 50,000 people to my website. And of those 50,000 people, a handful of them were interested in my abilities as a DevOps engineer and reached out about potential work opportunities. And so this did catalyze some contract work that I've done since. I have had contracts come through YouTube videos as well. I think that's less common, but I did have one contract that literally came out of a YouTube comment, even when I had a very small audience. So I only had, 150 subscribers in this video. What video was it? It was one about, I think one of my very first ones. Let's see. Go here. Yeah, I think it was either this 1 hour workshop video or this CI/CD workshop video, and someone watched it and they knew that their company was doing something similar to that, and so they said, "Hey, would you want to come help us implement this?" And so that was a cool way to get a job opportunity out of some content that I had made. But I think it's not a guaranteed way. It's not a guaranteed solution, but I do think it helps to increase the surface area of potential opportunities. Because if I had never published those articles or published those videos, those companies wouldn't have known that I was doing contract work and known that I had those skills. So yeah, I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket, but I do think it is helpful and a good way to help get your personal brand established for others in the industry to know the type of work that you can do and the type of value that you can bring. Othmani, hello, hope you're doing great. I hope you are doing great. Thanks for stopping by and glad to have you here. But yeah, I need to get back to writing more articles for my website. I haven't posted one since November, and so I really should start with every video that I put out. I should have a corresponding written piece as well. I think would be a valuable thing, because I know some people like to consume YouTube videos for learning, others would prefer written content, and others would prefer just to go to the GitHub repo. So I need to start building out the other pieces around the various projects that I'm putting out there. I'm just gonna leave the party time comment up there until someone else says anything. But yeah, so like for Kubernetes, I would probably use Terraform to provision the cluster. I would probably use GitHub Actions for CI/CD. I would likely use Helm charts to help deploy the application itself. Heroku has a lot of their own tooling already built in. So I haven't done too much with Heroku, but I think they make it quite easy to spin this type of thing up. And so it would probably just be some scripts to help make that a little more ergonomic. And then for serverless, I think, is it serverless framework? Is the tool that a lot of people use for managing this type of thing, serverless framework. Zero friction serverless deployment. Yeah, so I haven't done too much with serverless architectures, but I think that would be an interesting thing to explore, since I know a lot of people love them. And the fact that they can scale down to 0 when there's no load is pretty awesome. A couple of other things that I think would be fun is there's another YouTuber whose name is Jeff Geerling, and he has an awesome channel that's much larger than mine, where he does lots of things. He had a lot of Ansible content, he has Kubernetes content, but when he reached 10,000 subscribers, he did a challenge to launch 10,000 pods at once. And so I think that would be a fun challenge to try to replicate. The previous video that I did about creating a super tiny container image was one that I did sort of thinking towards this, of wanting to have a super tiny lightweight image that would enable me to more easily accomplish the 10,000 pod challenge. So there's a couple of other roadblocks that I need to alleviate, one of which is the maximum number of pods you can have per node in Kubernetes, which is by default, I think 110. And so to get to 10,000, you would then need almost 100 nodes. Ideally, I wouldn't want to deploy 100 nodes because that would be pricey and slow. So I need to go in and figure out, I think there's a setting within the kubelet configuration to increase the maximum number of pods. And so I need to figure that out. And once I do that, I think it should be relatively easy to hit this 10,000 pod number, but it could be, I'm sure when you get to that large of numbers, you start to run into some edge cases and you start to hit some issues. I'm a web developer in a company that doesn't have a DevOps engineer, so I'm trying to do this job also. I started with Docker, still confused about what I should learn and in which order. Yeah, so DevOps is kind of crazy in that it contains so many different subfields. So roadmaps.sh is a really cool website that has roadmaps for a variety of different tech topics. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Paste the actual one. Yeah, so roadmaps.sh is a cool site that has roadmaps for full stack, back-end, front-end, etc. But the DevOps one is, I think, pretty good. And they walk through a path, and it looks overwhelming to start. I think focus on one portion of this roadmap, try to learn, at least grasp the fundamentals of it before you move on. And so their suggestion, and I think it's a pretty good one, is first you need to know how to program in some language. Their code here is to use this purple check mark for their personal recommendation, and then the green check marks are good options, but not necessarily required. So they're suggesting Go. I think Go or Python are probably the top two that I would suggest. Then once you know some programming language, you can jump on to the next topic of learning about an OS. And so in this case, Linux is probably the most useful OS to learn about. Lots of different topics here. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in many of them. I know a little bit about all of them, and an intermediate about some of them. So I know enough to get by. Yeah, within Linux, there's all these different distributions. I think Ubuntu is a super useful one. A lot of Docker images are based on Debian images, so knowing a little bit about how they work and how to manipulate things within those systems is a useful skill to have. Working within terminals and just sort of the fluidity with which you can do things from a command line versus having to have a graphical user interface for everything is a valuable skill. Moving down the list, you got networking, you got just some internet web application concepts around caching and proxying, load balancing, etc. And then they're suggesting infrastructure as code, CI/CD. So yeah, don't feel like you need to learn all of these. Think about what the different challenges that you have in your current, your company, and which of these topics are most relevant to help address those challenges. So if your team is spending lots of time trying to debug your server configurations, then maybe diving into infrastructure as code and getting those configurations into Terraform or Ansible would be the most valuable next step for yourself and for your team. Or if you, basically take a look at the specific situation that your team is working through and trying to accomplish, and pick somewhere along this roadmap that will help to address those is sort of the advice that I would give. Hopefully that's helpful. What do you think about deploying using Daku? So I haven't used Daku personally. I know that it is a PaaS, kind of like Heroku, but I think you can host it yourself. Docker powered mini Heroku. I think it's cool that it's open source and you can look under the hood and make changes if you need to. Most of the companies that I work with on a consulting basis have already sort of graduated from the platform as a service offerings and are already running their own systems in GCP or AWS. And so I don't have a ton of experience with these platform as a service offerings, so I can't give a super informed opinion there. I should do some experimentation with Heroku and with Daku and see what the limits of those platforms are. But yeah, sorry, I can't give an informed opinion on that. Nate W says, I'm a recent grad starting out in a small dev team, low-level roles, have lots of opportunities doing DevOps work. Going forward, how do I distinguish myself as more exclusively DevOps material? Yeah, I think starting off in a web development, web software engineering role is a good place to be. You can learn the fundamentals of the software that you need to run, and that will all become super useful even if you move into a more focused DevOps role in the future. The key, I think, will be to just volunteer for the types of tasks that you're most excited about, and if those are DevOps related things and building out the team's infrastructure and CI/CD and that stuff, just being willing to raise your hand when that type of skill set is needed and that type of activity needs to be done, and taking on those roles and then delivering, sort of over delivering on what you promised there, will make it more likely in the future that people will look to you for those types of things in the future. And then slowly you can just transition more and more towards that type of work if that's what you're most excited about. Hey Astrid, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully to 100K soon. I think you're gonna be hot on my tails to hit 10K. I saw your channel is growing very fast. You only have a few videos, but you're already growing quickly. Pyros says, what's your opinion on Argo CD? Thinking about using it for our project, but not sure about alternatives. So Argo CD is a really awesome GitOps tool. Argo CD. It basically allows you to manage all of your Kubernetes configurations via Git. I think it's a really powerful tool. I haven't used it a ton, but I do really like it. A competitor would be something like Flux from Weaveworks. They're both Weaveworks. Both of these are GitOps tools that allow you to define your configuration that you want deployed and then let it, as an agent running in the cluster, handle making sure that that is the case. The other really powerful thing about a GitOps tool like Argo CD or like Flux is that you don't have to have your CI/CD pipeline authenticated into your production cluster. You can build your images, push them to a Docker registry, and only the only the agent, Argo CD or Flux in this case, running inside the cluster needs to be authenticated to modify that cluster. And so that keeps a cleaner security boundary at the edge of the cluster. So that's one advantage of the GitOps approach. The other being that you can just have more confidence that what you have deployed matches what you have configured in your source code. So yeah, I think I'm bullish on Argo CD and GitOps in general. I think not a ton of companies have reached that GitOps flow yet, but they're working towards it. I think most companies are at the point where they are doing CI/CD, but their deployment is happening from that pipeline. It's more of a push deployment. So they built their container and then they run a Helm install upgrade or a kubectl apply command. Whereas ideally they would get to a point where they could push that container, the new container image, modify a configuration, potentially in a different GitHub repo that defines the state of the production cluster, and then let the upgrade itself happen by Argo CD or Flux. Let's see. David Isayan, what do you think about HashiCorp Vault? Are you using it as a key management system, or are you using alternatives to that? I think HashiCorp Vault is pretty awesome. I haven't worked with it too much personally, like I haven't set it up for any companies or anything like that. It is a relatively complex system, but it provides immense power in terms of being able to have short-lived credentials that automatically get rotated or expire. So I think oftentimes companies they'll create service accounts to do things within their cloud, whether that's GCP or AWS. Those keys for those service accounts then get stored in a CI/CD system or potentially on someone's local system if they're doing some testing. And unless you have it configured to automatically expire after some amount of time, then there's some likelihood down the road that key gets compromised and that ends up becoming an issue. HashiCorp Vault gives you the power to do something where, and I actually included some references to it in this article, where now instead of having this long-lived credential that you need to protect, instead you can have a short-lived credential which maybe only lasts for a day or for 2 days or even 30 minutes if it's for that use case. And it just really reduces the blast radius for a potential breach. Obviously you want to avoid breaches if you can, but accepting the fact that there's some non-zero potential that those keys will be leaked, if you can make it such that at the time when they are leaked, they are no longer usable, I think that's a really powerful tool to help minimize the damage that something like that would cause. The alternative, sort of, I would say one step below something like HashiCorp Vault, is using a secret manager, something like Google Cloud Secret Manager. I think Amazon has an equivalent. And so this will allow you to store those secrets in the cloud in an encrypted fashion in a way that you can access them programmatically via a client, and they'll have clients available for most all of the common languages. So Google has a Python client and a Node.js client and a .NET client, etc. So this is not quite as good as using something like Vault, because Vault will handle a lot of the dynamic provisioning and cycling of those keys, but it's one step lower that still gets the job done for a lot of people, is to put those secrets within a secret manager like this and access them programmatically via your application. So I like HashiCorp Vault. I haven't used it a ton. It seems relatively complex to get set up and managed properly, but I haven't had a ton of personal experience doing so. Any additional questions in the chat? If you're here and you haven't hit that thumbs up button and you want to support the stream and get more people to come, if you hit that thumbs up button, I think YouTube may push it out to more people's home screens. So feel free to do so if you are so inclined. So yeah, any questions or comments or content suggestions, all welcome in the chat. And Nate W says, which learning experience do you consider more valuable? Building on top of a well-established enterprise software environment, or trailblazing from scratch, choosing your own tech stack as you go? That's a good question. I think they are both valuable. You learn different things when doing each of those. So operating within an existing large code base and being able to rapidly understand other people's code and debug other people's code that you maybe haven't seen before and don't have a full understanding of the system in your head, just because systems get so complex that it's impossible for any one individual to have that full understanding. That is a super valuable skill set in and of itself. That is a different skill set than being able to sit down with a blank whiteboard and say, here is my desired state of the world, and here's my path to get there in like an entirely greenfield type project. So I think they're different experiences. They're both super valuable. I think for someone starting their career, starting within a company and learning how to work within an established team and work within a large code base is the path that I would recommend, versus just starting from scratch and trying to build something out of thin air without having already worked within a team. I think it's just, you'll be able to find much stronger mentorship and develop more quickly as an engineer within a team environment like that. I don't think it's bad to do it on your own, but I think you will progress more quickly within a larger team, at least initially. That being said, once you have done that, I think getting that other experience of starting from scratch and building something out from nothing is another valuable set of experiences as well. So I would suggest most people start within a company and stay there at least a few years to sort of establish themselves and mature their engineering approach within that team. Nick says, working on a project. Actually, let me do this. There we go. Working on a project, learning mainly Terraform and Ansible to start, struggling to figure out an application to configure and deploy. Think about a Hugo site behind Nginx. Yeah, so I think a static site hosted from Nginx is fine. I think it is still relatively simple in that like you probably won't reach too many edge cases. That's kind of what I was getting at when I brought up this potential future content for the channel, is having a full stack application that is more than just a hello world is kind of important when you start to use these DevOps and infrastructure tools, because if your application itself is too simple, you don't end up really finding any of the challenging portions of the task, and so then when you end up getting to a point where you encounter those more challenging situations, you may or may not be prepared to handle them. So I think starting with a Hugo site hosted from using Nginx to serve it would be fine. And so in that case, you could use Terraform to provision a virtual machine on one of the clouds. You could use Ansible to install Nginx onto that machine, or install Docker, etc. onto that machine, and then you could configure your application to build the Hugo site and serve it via Nginx. I think that would be a fine approach. I think once you accomplish that, you could start to add some complexity. That complexity could be building out a site that is not a static site built with Hugo, but is a dynamic site where you have some front end, which is querying an API, which is grabbing data from the database. And all the moving pieces that are required to get that working, I think would be a good evolution of that initial project to learn some more and showcase some additional skills. That's what I would suggest there. Cool. Yeah, I'm interested to hear from anyone in the audience which of my videos you saw first. Would be a fun thing to learn. If you remember which of my videos you saw first. I love looking back at, I think I now have almost 50 videos on my channel, and just sort of the quality of, the production quality early on was so low. And so it's really cool to see how it has evolved into where I'm at now. So it's always cool to look back and see how far the channel's come. Nick, you are very welcome. That was a good question, so thanks for stopping by and asking it. And then Nick asked, less technical question, what was your first job? So I had a few jobs before I got into tech. When I was in high school, I worked for actually one of my dad's business partners who had a large estate, and that estate had, or sorry, not estate, but a large piece of land which he lived on. And there was lots of maintenance required to upkeep the landscaping. And so I was mowing lawns and watering trees and plants and picking weeds, kind of a do-it-all manual laborer. And so that was one summer. Another summer, I was a waiter, a server in a restaurant. So it was a restaurant in my hometown that I worked at between my freshman and sophomore years of college. And so I did not like that job at all, but it did give me a lot of empathy. For now, when I go to a restaurant, I understand the stresses and challenges of being a server much more. And so I think it's very helpful for me to have had that experience now moving forward. Whenever I'm in a situation where I'm at a restaurant or some situation like that, I have a much better understanding of what is going on behind the scenes and why certain things might be taking longer than other people might expect. And I'm able to have a lot of empathy for the person on the other side of that interaction. So I think while I didn't enjoy that job at all, it was a very valuable experience. And then after that, I had some internships in college. And I actually didn't study computer science. I studied mechanical engineering. So my internships and first jobs out of college were all in the mechanical engineering space. And then after college, after I had a few years of working at Lockheed Martin, which is an aerospace company, where I was a research engineer working on a variety of topics, I made the transition into software, and I joined a health technology startup here in the Bay Area. And so that was in 2018, and I've been in the DevOps space ever since. It was interesting though. So I went mechanical engineering to software engineering, where I was a full stack developer, and then switched where I wasn't very good at the front end. I couldn't make things look as nice as I would like, and so I was much better at designing and building our infrastructure and backend systems. And so similar to what I recommended earlier, I just started volunteering for more and more of those jobs, and I picked up that type of work, and then eventually decided to go full-time, focused on DevOps. Nick says, completely agree, was a valet at a restaurant, now completely understand the service industry, also help with soft skills. Yeah, I think soft skills and being able to communicate clearly and connect with other people is a super valuable skill. And yeah, the service industry it brings its own challenges that are very different from the tech industry. And so having some understanding is a valuable thing. First video I saw was software engineer on M1. It was interesting. That video took off. I knew it was a hot topic. I had seen some posts on Twitter about the limitations that I bring up in the video, and I saw a lot of the tech YouTubers putting out their videos. They were just getting their preview devices, and every single one of them was just a glowing review. And so I just wanted to highlight the limitations that I knew were there. And so I think I saw the tweets and everything starting on Monday evening. I spent all day Tuesday scripting and filming and editing that video. I put it out Tuesday evening, and just immediately it started getting 10x the search results that any of my other videos were doing. And then, yeah, I think now it's almost up to 160,000 views. So I think a lot of people, that was their first introduction to my channel, which is interesting because that video is a little bit different than most of the ones on my channel. So hopefully those people saw it and then had some interest in the rest of this DevOps and cloud infrastructure content. So I'm glad that you saw that video and have joined the team and are here for more DevOps content. Saw your first video this evening. Oh, awesome. Deploying MERN application. Cool, yeah. So that was an application where I think I did it on DigitalOcean with an Atlas database. It might have been a live stream as well. I forget exactly. But yeah, there's so many different application stacks and infrastructure combinations that I feel like I'm still just scratching the surface in terms of being able to put out content to help people learn about this sort of thing. Yeah, ULA. I know ULA. Yeah, I was at Lockheed for about 5.5 years. I finished up my master's degree in 2012, and I left Lockheed in 2018. Yeah, it was a great company to work for. I worked for a few different divisions within the company. I got to work on some really neat projects. Bruce says, I have an idea for a project I want to create. Would like to know your personal thoughts. A website that can scrape data from the most popular websites with one click. Scrape data from search engines. 10,000 dog images. Do we need 10,000 dog images? Do you think it will be useful for people at all? So yeah, what's the end use case there? If we try to think about what's the user story of your ideal customer or user? Is it someone who already uses those platforms and now wants to have an archive of those data, those images, or those search results? Or is it a researcher who needs to create a data set from those platforms to do their analysis on? I think that's how I would frame the question of will it be useful, is who is the end user and what are they trying to do with it? And then how does the platform satisfy that need? Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. I personally don't have a need for a web scraper that can grab 10,000 dog images with one click, There might be someone who has that need, but I am not that person. So thinking through who that end user is and why they need this product and what they're going to do with it is how I would think about it. Okay. Next question. Why is the usage of Docker Compose in production not recommended? I think there's a few reasons that people don't like using Docker Compose in production. One of which is that usually within Docker Compose, you're defining specifically one replica of your front end, one replica of your back end, one replica of your database. Ideally, you want to decouple those systems such that if you need to scale up your, let's say your API server because of load, you can do so independently of your front end or your database. And so Docker Compose doesn't really provide for that. The other thing that Docker Compose doesn't do a great job of is, I think, managing secrets and credentials. You're oftentimes passing them in via files, which is a little clunky. And finally, you probably wouldn't want to define your database in that situation anyways. And Docker Compose doesn't automatically restart failed instances. So yeah, there's a number of things there that cause it not to be great. And using a container orchestrator like Docker Swarm, which is now becoming less popular, but Kubernetes, Docker Swarm, HashiCorp's Nomad is another good one, provide a much cleaner story for how you can scale things independently, how you can automatically do health checks, etc., to restart failed applications. So yeah, I think it's fine, but it's just not really well suited for building applications that need to scale. In your opinion, how is the Bay Area for new grad, DevOps, and cloud? Intern there's more sys admin, infra role, hadn't discovered DevOps. I think the Bay Area is as good as any. I think right now, with the world being so remote, it is less, like you can oftentimes get a job in the Bay with a Bay Area company without necessarily even having to be here. So I think it's a great place to be. I don't think you necessarily have to come here though. I think you can find good DevOps and infra roles elsewhere or remote. So it's a good place to be. That's where I'm at, but it is not a requirement, I would say. Seems weirdly niche and more difficult to jump in from junior new DevOps engineer. Yeah, DevOps is an interesting field because it requires so much context around both knowing how the web application runs and knowing how the infrastructure works that you oftentimes will benefit greatly from having some experience under your belt. So I think it's a hard field to just jump into from scratch, and maybe spending some time working as a developer or as a operator, a sysadmin type person can be a valuable experience to then lead into DevOps down the road a bit. And I'm actually losing my voice a little bit, so I'll probably stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes and then I will probably drop. But it's been super fun to hang out here with everybody. Nick, I fell in love with Oakland/FSF, trying to get back out there. Yeah, I've lived in the Bay Area since 2015. I did spend some time on the East Coast again after the pandemic started, just because everything was remote and there was nothing really tying my wife and I here to SF, so we decided to drive east. We packed up our apartment and drove east, and then we just moved back to SF about a little over a month ago, so it's been fun to be back and good to be take advantage of the California weather in April, whereas we were outside of Boston where it was a bit frigid before. So yeah, it's definitely a good place. Cost of living is kind of crazy, but luckily the jobs do pay well, so that's exciting and helpful. But yeah, I like the Bay Area. We are enjoying it now. We have a lot of friends from school and from work out here, so it's a good place to be. Andre says, hi, I'm using Docker Compose. Is it mandatory to containerize the front end as well? It is not mandatory. You could, like if you're running a development setup, you could have your API and database running, or any of the portions running in Docker. And if you configure your front end to call the proper localhost port, it should be able to access that. So yeah, definitely not required. I think it is useful if you're going to deploy your front end in a container eventually. It's useful to have it containerized, but if you're gonna, let's say, build your React app and put it into an S3 bucket, then maybe it's not worth it to deploy or to containerize it for your local system. I like to Dockerize everything just because it gives me a clean starting point where if I run it on my system and I have someone on my team run Docker Compose up, ideally it will run right away and there's not going to be a bunch of issues, but I don't think it's a requirement at all. Grab the COVID SF rates. Yeah, rent has dropped significantly in the past year or so. Still expensive, but not as expensive. BR says, do you think there's real value in multi-cloud when you can architect things multi-region with one provider? Learning the gotchas of two cloud providers is harder. Yeah, multi-cloud is an interesting concept. I don't think too many players or companies are actually doing it. Yeah, the cost of adding complexity to manage your systems across multiple providers, the cost both from now I'm going to have two sets of resources deployed, as well as the mental cost and the software complexity and engineering time that go into building out and defining those configurations is a very real thing. There's also a cost, oftentimes data egress, of moving data outside of your current cloud provider can be very expensive. And so it is a challenge to define your architecture such that you minimize the amount of data that would cross that boundary and invoke those penalties or those costs. So yeah, I think defining things multi-region gives you quite a bit of resilience against a particular data center going down. Something like Kubernetes does help to reduce the lock-in to a particular vendor because it abstracts away some of the specifics of the compute resources such that your application ideally could be deployed across any Kubernetes cluster. But I don't think it adds too much over just a well-designed architecture within a single cloud, especially given what I said earlier about added complexity and added costs. Daily routine study to keep progressing. Right now, I just try to keep a Trello board for personal things, a separate board for client work, all the tasks that I have to do, and on and then a third one for DevOps Directive and my video and written content. And so within there, I try to keep a backlog of the various tasks that need to be done. And some of that might include things that I need to learn or topics that I need to cover. And so that's my approach. I don't have anything sort of specific to share there, but I think having a system for doing to-do lists and that sort of thing is useful. David says, the best way to containerize the front end is to serve it with assembly server. That's right, keep it small. David is referencing my latest video in which I built a very tiny container image based on an assembly web server, which was only 6 kilobytes. So that will certainly speed things up. Sibji says, any ideas on how to learn Terraform to students without using a cloud provider, something like a VMware Workstation or VirtualBox? So Terraform, while the major use case for Terraform is interfacing with cloud providers, you can have a Terraform provider that interfaces with any API. Like you could write your own custom provider for any API, but I don't think you'll get the same understanding as a student without actually deploying real cloud resources. I think conceptually, it would be much harder to understand the concepts if you were just calling out to some custom little API that you had built. I think you can keep costs quite low as long as you choose the resources like the F1 micro instance or the T2 micro instance on Amazon. You can keep costs quite low, but I think it is important to actually provision and tear down those resources within a real cloud from a learning perspective. Nick has a suggestion here. Started along this path, figured out Terraform with KVM, eventually turned to AWS. Cool, that's interesting. I'd be interested to hear about how you were using Terraform with KVM initially. Yeah, I think the costs, as long as you don't do anything too crazy, the costs of bringing infrastructure up and down, because it's charged on a oftentimes per second, sometimes per minute basis, is quite affordable. Thanks for the input. Thank you to Nick. Yeah, even it is required that you have an account set up with billing, even if the cost amount is going to be quite low. For education purposes, I wonder if you could reach out to one of the cloud providers and get some credits such that you could cover all of the costs with those credits. And then the other thing, I'm not sure if you could use like a prepaid Visa card with or without any. I wonder if you had a prepaid Visa card with no funds on it, if it would like let you get past just put that in so there is a credit card and then have some credits to actually cover any minimal costs. Not sure, but anyways, I think I am going to wrap up here. Thank you to everyone for coming out. My streaming quality hopefully was smooth enough. I was trying to figure things out on the fly in terms of the comment overlays and the music playing in the background. I'm starting to lose my voice now, but it was super fun to get to chat with some of the folks in the audience. And I see one final question coming in from Allie. It should pop up here in a minute. Let's see here. He says, have you deployed monorepo? Yeah, so I've worked with monorepos and multi-repos. They both have benefits and downsides. I think monorepo simplifies certain things. Let's let's see. It simplifies certain things in that now you can have one source of truth and a single set of CI/CD pipelines. If you are refactoring across your code base, it's much easier to catch references to certain things because there's a stricter interface, and when you're searching across that code base, it's easier to find the relevant invocations. When you have multi-repo, it can be harder to refactor things without breaking, but it does allow you to separate, let's say, continuous integration for things that are irrelevant to each other. So in a multi-repo situation, it's easier to test all of one microservice's code without having to touch the tests for the other. So yeah, I think it often makes sense to, and you can always migrate from one to the other. I think smaller teams oftentimes benefit from initially having one repo. If you start to run into issues with things competing with each other, you can break that out into multi-repo. And then once your team is really large, it's interesting. It reverses again, where you start to benefit from having a mono repo, and you need to build out the tooling to make it actually possible to work with. You're welcome, CJ. Thanks for coming. Thanks for commenting and asking questions. I think there was some good discussion there. Great to have you here, Pyros. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for stopping by. Sorry, we're just wrapping up here at the end, Ali. For React app dependent on local package linked using Yarn. How to get it done? So you would want to build your application inside of the GitHub action is the key here. So if you're Dockerizing it, your Docker file will build it. If not, you would build out, you would run like your Yarn install within the GitHub action and copy the necessary packages into the server. Thanks, Andre. Thanks for joining. Hopefully pass you on Bart. Yeah, for sure. That sounds good. And I'll look for all of you in the comment section on future videos. Thanks for stopping by. Take care. End the stream.